This took place back in the early 90s. I grew up in a very small village in Peru, right at the base of a mountain. Life there was simple. Dirt roads, everyone knew everyone, kids played football until the sun went down. One afternoon, I was out in the open field near the edge of the village, kicking around an old soccer ball by myself. I don't recall why I wasn't with my friends that day. The field was bordered by a dense forest that we were strictly told never to enter. A young boy had already been killed by a fer de lance, the most dangerous snake in our country. Jaguars were also known to hunt those woods, though they'd mostly kept their distance from the village after being shot at enough times. But after an El Niño tore through the area, several trees had been uprooted and knocked over, and the base of the mountain was now visible from the field. That's when I saw it. A small dark opening in the rock face, something that had clearly been hidden for years beneath the bushes and tall grass. It looked like the mouth of a cave. At first I ignored it. I kept kicking the ball around, but after another hour the curiosity started eating away at me, and I told myself I would just take a quick look inside. No more than 5 minutes. The moment I stepped past the entrance, the air changed. It became thick and heavy, like I was trying to breathe underwater. My chest felt tight, and every instinct I had screamed at me to turn back. Small holes and cracks in the rock above let thin blades of daylight cut through the darkness, lighting the way just enough to keep going. I went deeper anyway, and then I saw them. Hanging from tiny ropes attached to the ceiling were dolls. Dozens of them. Crude little figures made of cloth and sticks, each one with long rusty spikes or nails driven straight into the head or neck. Some had multiple. They swayed slowly. Even though there was no wind inside that cave, my stomach turned. I had heard stories about the bruja, witches brought to these mountains by the Spanish centuries ago. The elders said they were once healers before the horrors of the Inquisition twisted them towards something darker. That they had turned to dark magic in order to punish the conquistadors, but lost control of it. That some of them still lived in these mountains. Like most of the children in our village, I had always dismissed these stories as fables. But standing in that cave, staring at those dolls, I deeply regretted not taking them more seriously. I should have run, but something kept pulling me forward. The tunnel narrowed until I had to duck my head, and eventually the outside light stopped coming through entirely. Then, from around a sharp corner in the corridor, I saw the flicker of firelight on the rock walls. I turned the corner and entered a full cavern lit by 2 torches mounted on the rock, burning with a low, steady flame. What they revealed stopped my heart. Bones. Skeletons embedded directly into the walls as if they had been pushed inside the rock itself. More hung from the ceiling like the dolls had. Others were piled on the floor in stacks. Some were clearly animal bones, but most were human. And some of the skulls were small, like a child's skull. I don't know how long I stood there. My legs finally listened to me and I ran, scraping my arms and knees on the rocks as I scrambled back toward the entrance. I burst out into daylight and didn't stop running until I hit the edge of the village, before I could make it to my house. I ran into a neighborhood girl named Valentina, around my same age, who stepped out from behind a wall and stopped me. She looked concerned and asked what was wrong. I told her everything. The cave, the hanging dolls, the skulls and bones. While she was standing right in front of me, her eyes rolled back into her head until only the white showed. A deep demonic voice that absolutely was not hers came out of her mouth, slow and deliberate. "If you tell anyone about what you saw, your entire family will perish." Then Valentina collapsed to the ground. A second later, she woke up confused, asking what had happened. I helped her up, mumbled something about her fainting, and ran the rest of the way home without saying another word. I never told anyone. Not my parents, not my friends, not a single soul. I carried that secret like a stone in my chest for the rest of my life in Peru. When I tried going back to find the cave mouth in that same area, it was simply gone. Nowhere to be found. In 2003, I moved to the United States. My parents passed away a few years ago. My last relatives in Peru. For the first time in my life, I feel safe enough to speak about what I saw. I still don't know exactly what I walked into that day. But whatever it was, that cave was used for some deeply malevolent form of ritual. And that voice that came out of Valentina's mouth, I will hear it for the rest of my life. This happened a few years back, just outside my workshop in Phoenix. I'm the guy you call when something with an engine breaks down. Cars, lawnmowers, off-road vehicles. When my buddy bought a beat-up dune buggy off Facebook Marketplace and asked me to help fix it, I said sure. It was a piece of work, but I spent the next couple of weekends welding, swapping out parts, and getting the engine running again. The day came to test it. I told myself I'd do a short loop, stay within a mile or two of the workshop so I could walk back if anything went wrong. Of course, things went wrong. The buggy left me stranded maybe a mile out into the desert. Engine just took a dump. No warning, no build-up. I tried everything I knew. It wasn't starting. No cell service out there either, so I had no choice but to start walking back, kicking up dust with every step. The heat was brutal that day. The kind that makes the air sting your mouth until it feels like sandpaper. I figured I'd be back at the shop in 20 minutes. About 10 minutes into the walk, I noticed something odd in the sky. A single dark cloud, very small, just hanging there by itself. There's something deeply jarring about that. One isolated dark cloud in an otherwise clear phoenix sky. Then it started growing, fast, unnaturally fast. In less than a minute, it had spread out and swallowed the entire sky above me, turning everything gray and heavy. The wind hit hard. Rain started hammering the desert in loud, heavy drops, and thunder cracked so loud I covered my ears and dropped to one knee. I started running, not from fear, just to avoid getting completely drenched. That's when I looked up toward a sandstone peak off in the distance and saw a figure standing at the very top, perfectly still. Over the howling wind, I heard something else, a low rhythmic chanting that didn't sound like any language I had ever heard. It rose and fell with the wind, almost like it was calling to the storm. Lightning began striking the ground around me, way too close for comfort. I spotted the old roof of a decommissioned gas station up ahead and sprinted for it, ducking under the overhang just as another bolt lit up the sky. I stood there by one of the old gas pumps, breathing hard, watching rain come down in sheets. The chanting seemed to grow louder, even though I was under cover. I kept scanning the ridge, but the figure had already vanished into the downpour. The storm was violent, but it only lasted a few more minutes. Then, just like that, the clouds started breaking apart. The rain stopped and the sky cleared like nothing had ever happened. I stepped back out into the sand and immediately felt that something was wrong. I was still soaking wet, but the ground was bone dry. The sand looked exactly as it had before the storm. No puddles, no damp patches, nothing. I pulled out my phone and checked the weather app. Clear skies, 0% chance of rain. The same forecast it had shown all day. I stood there for a long time, heart still pounding. The figure on the peak, the chanting. The way that single cloud had exploded across the sky in seconds and then vanished without leaving a single drop on the ground. It felt deliberate, purposeful. I eventually made it back, grabbed my truck, towed the buggy home and fixed the clogged filter the next day. But I still think about that phantom storm. Rain clouds don't swallow an entire sky in under a minute and then disappear without a trace. And that chanting, that figure standing on the sandstone, something tells me that was witchcraft. Whatever it was, it's not something I mess with. Ever since, I make sure not to go too far out when I'm test driving something. This happened way back in the mid-1970s, when I was just a little kid growing up in a small town in Ohio, about 20 miles south of Cleveland. Our neighborhood was deep in the backwoods. Just dirt roads, thick trees, and not much else. Me and a couple of other neighborhood kids, all between 7 and 9 years old, used to play hide and seek almost every day after school because there was nothing else to do. Our favorite spot was a big old abandoned 2-story house that sat behind the neighborhood. It had been a bed and breakfast at one time, run by an old lady who had since passed away. After that, the house just sat there for years. No one bought it. No one tore it down. It was perfect for kids looking for a good hiding spot. One afternoon, I decided to find a new hiding place, somewhere no one would think to look. I snuck around the back, pushed open the door and made my way up the stairs toward the attic. Unlike my house, which had the classic pull-down ladder, this one had its own stairwell leading up from the upstairs hallway. I climbed the creaky steps and opened the attic door and froze in absolute horror. There was a row of lit candles on the floor, maybe 10 or 12 of them, arranged in a straight line leading across the attic like a path. At the end of that path, lined up against the far wall, was something I still cannot get out of my head. Dozens of crows had been disemboweled and hung on the wall with their wings spread wide. Their insides had been arranged in strange patterns on the floorboards beneath them. The smell hit me all at once and I felt my stomach flip. I turned and ran, screaming the whole way down through the back door and straight to my friends who were still playing in the yard. I told them they had to come see it. Candles, dead crows nailed to the wall, the whole thing. They looked at me like I was crazy, but they followed me back anyway. When we got to the house, the back door was still open. But when we reached the attic door at the top of the stairs, it was locked. It wouldn't budge no matter how hard we pushed or kicked it. There was no candlelight flickering underneath the door either. My friends decided I had made the whole thing up and had locked the door myself to mess with them. When I told my parents that night, they laughed it off and told me to stop making up stories and to stop going in that house. Nobody believed me, not one person. I listened to my parents and stayed away from the house from that point on. Eventually, the neighborhood expanded and the house was finally scheduled for demolition. But before the bulldozers arrived, the workers clearing it out discovered something. Several remains of animal skeletons throughout the house, mostly birds, but a few that may have been dogs or cats. They also found children's clothing, unidentified. Nobody ever claimed it. The police came and investigated, but other than more animal remains, they found nothing to indicate that anyone had been murdered there. Decades have passed, and I still think about those lit candles and those poor crows nailed to the wall. I still wonder who was using that house and what they were doing there. And I have a feeling, one I've never been able to shake, that if someone had taken a shovel to the ground where that house used to stand, they would have found something buried beneath it. He used to work at Walmart as a cashier. I was only 17. This was my first job ever, back in the fall of 2004. I didn't have a car at the time, so I relied on my parents to drive me to and from work. On this particular night, I was working a shift that ran from sometime in the afternoon until around 10 or 11 at night. By the time it got late, things were quiet as usual. Not many customers, and I'd only have someone come through my checkout line every now and then. Then, with about an hour left in my shift, I saw someone approach my lane. It was a man dressed as a clown. He was wearing mostly normal clothes, but his face was painted completely white. His hair was either dyed or a red wig. His nose was bright red, and all around his lips was painted red as well. Full clown makeup, so complete that I had absolutely no idea what the man actually looked like underneath it. It was strange enough on its own, but what made it worse was that it wasn't Halloween. I didn't know of any events going on nearby. There was no explanation for it. He was only buying one or two things. I said hi, and then, out of genuine curiosity in what I thought was a friendly way, I asked him why he was dressed as a clown. He looked at me with a hard, serious expression, almost a glare. He said nothing. I thought maybe he'd lost a bet, so I asked if that was it. Still nothing. Just that same cold stare. I said sorry and dropped it. The only words exchanged after that were when I told him the total and he paid. He took his items and walked out of the store. I tried to forget about it and moved on with the rest of my shift. A little while later, a co-worker I was friendly with walked by and mentioned, almost in passing, that there was a man dressed as a clown walking around the parking lot. I told him that same guy had just been through my checkout line. My co-worker said it was really weird and kept moving. When my shift ended, I clocked out and went to wait outside on the bench in front of the building for my mum to pick me up. The parking lot was mostly empty by then, quiet, dark. About a minute into waiting, I spotted him again. The clown. He was at the far end of the parking lot, walking slowly and not toward anything in particular, just drifting. He crossed over into a lane closer to the building, and that's when he noticed me watching him. He stopped, and he just stared at me with that same serious, cold expression on his painted face. I looked away. When I looked back maybe 10 seconds later, he still hadn't moved, still staring. He was a good 100 feet away, but it was deeply unsettling. After a while, I waved, not knowing what else to do. He didn't wave back. He just stood there, and then slowly shook his head almost in disgust and walked back toward the far rows of cars. I kept watching him move through the lot. Then he came back around again, closer to where I was sitting, and when he caught me watching him a second time, he stopped and glared again. That was enough. I got up and went back inside the store and waited for my mum in there. When she finally arrived, I rushed to the car and we left. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I looked back one last time. He was still there, standing in the lot staring in our direction. My mom saw him too. I never saw him again after that night, and I still have no idea who he was or what he was doing. I just know that he wasn't joking around. Whatever was going on in that man's head, it wasn't a game.